Hello and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, your bold host, Joe. Joining me this week is going to be Atlas, as always. We have a bit of a conversation about cards in general, what cards we look for when it comes to being CDH playable. Talk about some of the new cards from the new sets, some old classics, see if they still stick up or have a place in the metagame. What makes a card relevant in this format? What makes it powerful, potent? What draws us to these cards? That's kind of what we talk about. So come on down, get a drink with us.
So what are we doing this week?
We're doing fun versus competitive.
Competitive is fun.
Fun can be competitive.
Yes.
Yes.
I always have fun when I'm playing competitive.
No, that's true. I think when it comes to like CDH, I feel like there's two broader schools of thought. So you have like, okay, me and all my friends down at the local GameStop are playing CDH, but like there's nothing really like on the line. And then you have like competitive, where I guess I heard the term tossed around TDH versus like CDH, where it's like TDH. This is like we're playing at a tournament level, we're playing at Comp REL, like we're holding everybody to like hard the Comp REL rule set,
and time limit too.
and time limits and all that stuff. And then you just have like CDH, which is just like CDH. It's exactly what you would expect. And I think that's something that I think the community gets spun around a lot. I think everyone's locked into like just discussing terms a lot of the time, and this is one that definitely comes up. I feel like if you bring any sort of like off meta brew or different deck, you often get told like this isn't CDH, this is casual, high power, whatever.
I mean, that's what everyone was memeing on Slicer. Like this can't be viable. And then at top 16, and now it's starting to show up in a lot of different places. And suddenly everyone's like, "Oh wow, I guess Voltron is viable." Like,
I feel like we see this like pretty frequently. Where like someone just like has a deck idea, it's like it's got something going on, and everyone laughs at it until like it does something, and everyone goes, "Oh, well, I guess we were wrong."
yeah.
And it's like it begs the question, like, okay, are we jumping the gun too frequently?
Well, I remember there was some talk about Tivit when that card first came out.
Yeah.
People are like, "Oh, this card's 6 mana." I mean, it does cool stuff, but this will never see competitive play, and now it sees a lot of competitive play.
Jeweled Lotus is a hell of a card.
That is facts.
Mana Crypt pays for it.
I think that it's just crazy how narrow-minded CDH players are in general. Like, don't get me wrong, I get locked into my own little like narrow lanes of perception, but I do at least try to say, oh, that could, like, that's at least worth testing, right? Like,
Yeah.
we should definitely give that a shot. I don't think it'll work. For the record, I don't think it'll work, but go out there now. It's your job to prove me wrong. And I think one of my takes is that I think a lot of people in the community, they just say that's not going to work and leave it at that. There's no, I would love to see it work. Like, prove me wrong. I guess your best shot could be taking it in this direction. There's at least from what I've seen online, which, as we know, the internet is a very wholesome and magical place where everybody puts their best foot forward.
Especially Reddit and Discord servers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Top tier humanity right there.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's just really, that's a great place to go if you're looking for the beatdown of a lifetime, where you're like, hey, I don't think that this is viable, and you're stupid for putting it forth. So I don't know. The internet's toxic. Long story short, the take everyone already knew, but I just wish that more people would show that sort of like, all right, well, now I'd like to see it succeed. Like, prove me wrong, like, in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It's being firm but supportive. Like, I don't think, very rarely, if ever, do I say like this isn't CDH. My usual go-tos are, okay, what does this provide to your strategy that like the status quo doesn't? Or I had another thing and it just like left me.
It's okay, I'll fill in with an anecdote here.
Yep.
So I was talking to some people on Reddit, I think a week or two ago. Somebody made a post on the CDH Reddit about this new card from Mom, some like Loxodon Conclave Captain or something like that. At any rate, it's a 6 mana, like 4/4 with Trample, Convoke, and backup. Backup 1. I think it's 1. Might be a little more than that, but at any rate, basically it has backup. So it has backup 3 times.
That guy. Yeah.
So I think it was backup 1 3 times. And so they were asking if that card had any place in like Blood Pod, which I'm still not convinced that that card has any place in Blood Pod. It's a very specific list. It's really like should be very well tuned to whatever the expected meta is to hate on those things. But I
it's the Silver Bullet Toolbox deck. Like,
yeah, but I could see a card like this Conclave Captain seeing play in another deck, like Shalayan Halar maybe, or something like that cares about counters, or it little slower, like some green-white beatdowny type style deck. So I don't think that the card's not viable, but there were definitely a couple of other people who are on there immediately saying, "Oh, this card's 6 mana, does nothing, no possible way." And of course, I'm like, I throw it out there. It's like I don't see what this card does. I don't know why you'd play it, but also like I would love to see it take off because it does seem really strong to be like, okay, well, I'll put 3+1/+1 counters on my commander and give it trample until end of turn, and now hit you and then double its +1/+1 counters 3 times. So it go 3 to 6 to 3 counters, doubles once, 6 counters,
6,
doubles
12,
again, 12, 24. Yeah,
yeah,
that was the number. So it gets 24 counters. Like if whoever gets hit with that commander card next dies.
Yeah,
you put that on that Thrasios, they die.
Yeah, I found the card in question for
please.
Everyone listening in. So it's called Conclave Sledge Captain. It's 5 and a green for a 4/4 Elephant Soldier with backup 1, backup 1, backup 1. Backup is a newer mechanic from new set Mother Machines or March of Machines. When this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If that's another creature, it gains the following abilities until end of turn. Each backup ability triggers separately. So you cast the spell, 3 backup, or card enters the battlefield, 3 triggers go on the stack. It has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Yeah, no, I think if you're a commander that like cares about +1/+1 counters like Shalayan Halar, which I think we're going to start seeing a resurgence of like +1/+1 counters like mattering because of that commander specifically. Absolutely, like a top end finisher. If you want to get spicy, you can natural order into this. Like it's not terrible. I think as far as finishers go, it's probably one of the more accessible finishers if you're a deck that like can take advantage of the counters synergy. I don't think you throw it in like generically is where it comes down to.
Yeah.
I think that this deck, once it finds a home, is going to be an absolute menace. But I don't think you toss it into just Penrith or Thrasio Shell or whatever green shell you toss it in.
Somebody was mentioning with Bruce Tarl, you do one-shot somebody with this card.
That's
like
okay.
Instantly.
That's
slap it down there, you target Bruce, and because he grants double strike, it's the first one hits, triples all the counters or whatever, and then the person just dies on the second swing.
That's fair.
I think final verdict on that Sledge Captain though. I'm kind of excited. I hope somebody like finds the right shell for that and breaks that card because I think it's like one of those ones where even if you're not technically like quote unquote supposed to be playing that card in a list, you could find a list that like it's good enough in. Like you just need another 6 cost for your birthing pod or something to evolution your 7 cost or whatever. This card is like to the point where it's like it's good enough. You could get away with it. But also like you might just throw it down and blow someone out. Like suddenly you just have a 24/24 or like a 24x on field or whatever. And now people are terrified. You slap out on a commander, your commander's now at 1 hit. Doesn't matter who it is. It could be Rogue Rack. Like doesn't really matter. It's kind of neat that way. I don't know. I think it's neat. I think it's a very interesting interaction. I've also been blown out by a Bane of Progress, not because all my artifacts and enchantments got nuked, mind you, but because it got 12 counters and there was a rule of law that came down immediately after it, so we all just died.
Yeah,
like, it just beat us to death.
That'll do that. I do like Bane of Progress. That was one of my favorite like tech pieces to toss in when I was playing Yi Sun, just because sometimes you just need a Bane of Progress.
That's like, and that's one of those cards too, where even now, where it's like, oh, this card's 6 mana. Like, I guess you can play it in Yisan. Like, it does remove a lot of stuff, but also, why would you? Card's
Mhm.
bad. Card doesn't do anything. It's a 6 mana 2/2. It's like,
Oh no,
yeah, but sometimes
mono
it's
green.
just a 6 mana like 17/17, and you hit people because they do not have the spot removal.
Even then, I feel like with a lot of those kind of creatures, I'm always looking for like, okay, that's cool. If I hard cast it, it's fine. If there's like another way to like get it into play without casting it, that's usually the criteria where I look at like, okay, how easy is this to put in like off a birthing pod? Are we on like evolution effects? Can we take advantage of that? You know, those kinds of synergies. You know, where it's like a pretty easy slot in.
Yeah, no, for sure. But you would say overall, like Sledge Captain would be an example of a card that's viable in CEDH, even though it's probably not going to be a staple.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cards that is a pretty reasonable finisher. It's a very fast finisher. Um, or like it lets you wall up pretty easily if like the game has like grinded down. I think it'll if it finds a home, it'll be in like green, red, X, like stacks your builds, your Rockos, your Shalais, your Rurikthars of the world, you know, where like you just want a good top end finisher that will just get in there really fast. I think for 6, especially 6 single green pip, I nothing comes to mind at that specific mana cost that will close out the game that fast. Because I mean, if you put it on one creature and you hit an open player, like you just grow that creature out of control and just knock them out the next turn.
Well, that's another good point. Is it has backup 3 separate times, so you can
Yep.
back up up to 3 different creatures.
Up to 3 creatures or the same creature once, and it'll get individual triggers because they're separate instances. If I understand the card correctly,
Or
so
you
like,
could back up a creature once and another creature twice, or something. Like you can split that up. It has a lot of flexibility.
Like I think it's specifically because the way that battle works or backup works, and the fact that it's 3 instances and you have that flexibility. Is it hold on? Is it creatures you control or creatures in general?
It's creatures you control.
On target creature.
Oh, but it only gains until end of turn is the other piece. When it enters the battlefield.
Put plus one most encounter. If that's another creature, it gains the following abilities until end of turn. Okay.
Yeah.
Until
so I guess you
until
could
end
like
of
do
turn.
like a weird flicker thing. Maybe like some sort of Kodama tech or something where you like you flush out your Resto Angel and you like flicker it in your Timna Kodama build or whatever. I don't know.
Does Kodama need that though?
No, Kodama doesn't need that. I'm just saying like you could abuse the trigger.
True.
True. But yeah, I think it's really interesting for sure. And we mentioned Slicer before. Slicer's another example of a card that people didn't think it was going to be viable in CEDH. But yet here it is, becoming very present in at least certain metas. I know that we have a Slicer player in our local area now. That's pretty cool. I've played against some other Slicer players down south in Oregon. So that's like the deck exists for sure. And it's really strong. It's complex to play, which I think is always fun. But that's just me. So what are the basic like tenets of what makes a card viable then? Like what are we looking for in a card to make it CDH viable?
I think that's a really good question. Because I think once you move beyond the scope of staples, and I feel like staples, some people just stop there. Like these are the best cards in any given color for given strategies. Like why look beyond? Like why look further? I think for me, I'm looking for something that either does something better. I'm looking for direct upgrades, side grades, or new tech in general. And I think that's kind of down to just any given deck because I play or I value commanders that do different things versus like my draw engines in the command zone. There are always like things that I'm always like looking out for, like, okay, does this work? Does that work with this given strategy? I think for me, it's just like the Brewers have it. Like I'm always on the look for something. I don't know what I'm on the lookout for, but I'm always on the lookout for something. So like Calmax, for example, like any like cool instant that does something better or different or does something on a completely different axis that I'm looking for, that's something that I'm interested in. Chainer, anything that has to do with the graveyard is always up for consideration.
Yeah, I think that's definitely because there's no denying card advantage in the command zone very strong. I think as long as it's efficient enough
Hmm.
which if you've been playing the format for a while, it's relatively easy to assess if a card advantage in the command zone is efficient enough. Like
Hmm.
that's going to be CDH playable. But I think for commanders and then other cards, if it's not just super efficient card advantage, it's really that's when evaluating a card comes in handy. So if we're looking at like Slicer, like what does that card provide that another mono red commander like say Goto's gonna win faster? What
Oh,
does Slicer
absolutely.
provide? Well, Slicer provides additional utility. It allows you to play some better stacks pieces than Goto. It comes down faster, more consistently, and it's really hard to disrupt your quote unquote combo because your combo is beat the crap out of everyone using every other player's combat stat.
Hmm.
And so it makes the deck really resilient. Something like the Sledge Captain, got to evaluate that card on like what can this, like you were saying, what can this contribute? How is this attacking on a different axis or something like that?
Hmm. I feel like Slicer specifically is also a mono red commander that's going to reward a more politically aligned player more so than we'll just stick to Goto for an example. I feel like if you're Goto, you don't have a lot of political like built-in political sway. You
What are
know
you gonna politic? I will not
exactly.
try and win the game on turn 2. I'll try and win the game on turn 4. Like,
I'm not going to put down this Trinisphere after I have been stopped. Like it's one of those. I think Slicer is a card that has hidden text. In so far as like it allows you to use politics to a greater degree. I think commanders that offer that are very very interesting. I think like the Kenriths of the world, the Slicers of the world, Thrasios to some degree, Calamax to some degree. Just because I'm a narcissist, I'm always going to mention Calamax because like these are things that yes they do offer me game plans, but they also offer utility to the table. They offer game plans for everybody else to kind of work together on. I think that's what Slicer offers over like Godo.
oh, definitely. Yeah, I think I was playing with a Slicer player down in the Portland area, couple like a month or two back, and very charismatic player,
Oh yeah.
very charismatic, and their gameplay was definitely rewarded for that. Unfortunately, we ended up getting like blown out by a Tivit player, but you know sometimes that just happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's one of those cards that you can sort of like you can play a color combination, but then sort of tweak it to your style a little bit more, right? And that's
Mhm.
always, as we've mentioned before, we think there's always advantage in that.
No, 100%. Like you, the player, in my mind, are always going to be more powerful than the cardboard that you wield. I think the cardboard that you wield should matter. I'm not saying like play junk and try and be like the greatest player in the world. You're going to run into a brick wall eventually, but understand that like your actions, your way that you carry yourself, the way that you handle everything is going to speak way more about your game plan and be more effective than like trying to play the tightest, most mechanical game. Obviously, you should be playing tight and mechanical where necessary. If you're playing with the homies at the LGS, whatever, like obviously, like shit's gonna happen, and like unless y'all are like specifically trying to practice under comp REL, even then, like it's a game. Like no one, what are we playing for? Laughs? Like come on.
For
Uh,
sure.
yeah,
Okay, so I'm gonna throw a couple cards at you from the new set. Then I'm gonna
go for it.
quiz you and see if you think they're gonna be viable or not. And
Go
then we
for it.
can maybe we'll come back to this in a later episode and
I like this
give
idea.
you the answer. Say
Mhm.
say, yes, we were right about this one, wrong about that one. Because all those like, best top 10 cards of the set or each new set or whatever.
I'm
Those
so tired of those
they're cool,
videos.
but it's not really
Like
original. So we're gonna do a
like
little Q&A. We're
you
gonna quiz you.
I feel like if you like spend any amount of time in any given Magic format, you're going to know the cards of impact pretty immediately. Very rarely will you see cards like sneak through the cracks
Well, we'll see.
and
Let's
blow
see
up.
what your takes are.
But I will always welcome the chance to be wrong. I love being wrong.
All right, so to start off with, then, probably the most controversial card for CDH from the
Mhm.
set, Change the Equation. It is a 2-mana counterspell for 1 and 1 blue. You can then select a mode. You can either counter target spell with mana value 2 or less, or counter target red or green spell with mana value 6 or less. Viable or not, and why?
I think it's viable insofar as it is conditionally narrow and it's conditionally wide open. Um, I think this card competes for the slot of like delay, arcane denial, OG counter spell to some degree. Um, I think it'll see play in a decent amount of like 2-color decks, 3-color decks maybe, but probably not. I think I like the card. I think it does a lot. I think hitting 2 or less specifically, the fact that it is 2 or less, a lot of this format thrives on 2 or less. So like just hitting that on its own, it's pretty solid. Like this is going to be a card that I'm going to like seeing in my hand a decent amount of time. And then it also has like I guess like a gotcha type deal where you can hit something bigger. So it's red or green, 6 or less. When I think of what that hits that is essentially 3 or greater, it hits like Winota, it hits I guess Shalai and Halar because that we're just brained on that right now.
Chrome.
Yeah, it hits Crom. Counters Najila, but I feel like Najila's easy to just beat up
Throw back
or
out
like
there,
just
yeah.
remove, which is like with a removal spell.
Well, I think those throw back out there too. I'm not sure you'd want to waste a spell like this on countering Najila.
Yeah. I think it'll see some play. I don't think it'll be like insta staple, but I think if you want to diversify your counter suite, it's not a bad choice. Whether or not this beats out delay, I think it depends on if you're playing white. I think if you're playing white, you just play delay over this. I think if you're not playing white, yeah, toss it in. If you're seeing like specifically a lot of Crom, a lot of just like bigger red green decks, this counter is like birthing pods. Just remember that. It's decent. It's decent. It hits both creatures and non-creatures, which I think is huge.
Eldritch.
Yeah, Eldritch. Hits. Hit Neoform. Yeah, no, like I think this card's good. I think it's definitely viable, but not stable.
All right, next question. All right, this one, Phyrexian Censor. It's 3 mana, 1 white, and 2 generic for a 3/3 Phyrexian wizard. Each player cannot cast more than 1 non-Phyrexian spell each turn, so it's sort of like an Aethersworn style rule of law. And then non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, staple. It's a rule of law creature. If you are on a rule of law deck, I think you probably take out the enchantment one for this.
Just rule of law.
No, the enchantment creature rule of law.
Eidolon? That's a
Eidolon.
1/4 though. That's really hard to like. It doesn't die to a braid. It doesn't die to bolt.
I guess there's utility there. But also I think you just play both in that deck. Yeah, no, instant staple. If you're playing rule of law creatures, you just toss this one into the mix because it's rule of law and it's Thalia Heretic Cathar, which is already pretty decent on its own as a stacks creature. Yeah, instant staple. Next question.
Moving on.
No, like this. It's a rule of law on a creature. Oh, but you can cast. I think in like Atraxa decks, because Atraxa is Phyrexian now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it slots into there pretty effortlessly. You can play this, and you can play your commander and have counterspell backup and lock people out of further interaction. Yeah, it's good. Instant staple.
All right. Okay, here's one that a lot of Pioneer players, Standard players, and the like are excited for. Curious if you think it has any place in CDH. Voldaren Thrillseeker, another 3 mana creature. It's a red and 2. It's a vampire warrior. It is a 1/1. Has backup 2, and the ability that it possesses is pay 1, sacrifice this creature. It deals damage equal to its power to any target.
Ooh. See, I looked at this card and was like, "This is a chainer card." It's because it sort of does Mog Fanatic, but differently. Because it shoots its power, not just one. I think this card's very interesting. I think this card begs for some sort of shell where you're able to just make good use of it. Don't really see a lot of fling style effects in CDH.
Yeah, I was thinking like you'd have to get a high power number out there, which you don't typically see.
Yeah,
I hate to beat a dead horse, but I guess I could see like a Slicer deck theoretically could play an effect like this, though I don't know why
I don't hate this in Slicer.
I don't know why you want to play this though when you could also just suit him up again and
equal to its power. So I
pass
guess
them
you can
around.
like donk someone for a lot with all the equipment on it, play this, buff it even more, and then fling Slicer at something. Doesn't seem terrible. I don't think you want to give up Slicer plus all the equipment on it, but like it's not.
Yeah, that's kind of where I landed as well.
I'm going. It's not a staple. I think it begs for a home, but I think it offers something pretty useful if it is able to find that home. Yeah, because I want to I really want to put this in Chainer, but I don't think that's good enough because the flinging effect is only until end of turn. It costs some mana, which is potentially tight. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. The fact that it's colorless is pretty easy to use.
Yeah,
Um,
I think if the effect was like the effect allows you to sacrifice the chosen creature
mhm.
after the end of turn somehow, like maybe you make that separate from backup. You could like pair it
Yeah.
where it was like, if this creature backed up another creature, you may pay one and sacrifice that creature until end of
Mm.
or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I like what it does. I think it offers some pretty unique things. I just don't know where this slots in.
Najila,
Will
obviously, it's a warrior.
okay, sold right there. Yeah, I think we'll see some people testing around with this. I think we'll see probably some medium results just because there wasn't anything that immediately popped to my mind about this. I mean, in Necrotic, stealing this text seems like the easiest thing for me to break with, but is it better than Mog Fanatic?
No,
I don't think so.
personally, I do not think
I
so.
don't think so. I think Mog Fanatic is just more generically
Because you
useful.
aren't going to get the backup trigger off of like a news pile or something, so
Exactly.
it's not gonna work.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. It's one that I will probably keep my eye out on. I'll say this: I won't be surprised if someone is able to break it. I just don't know how to break this card yet.
Yeah.
I do like these styles of cards though, where they present an interesting question, and I have to try and figure out the answer for it. So I'll definitely be keeping my eye out on this card.
All right. All right. Let's jump into a battle here. Do a couple battles. This is a new card typing for anyone who may or may not be aware. Battle is it's like sort of it's the new card type. It's like tribal was back in the day, but they've done away with tribal since. So now we see battles. So battles are a non-creature permanent that when you cast them and they enter the battlefield have some variety of effect. Now we have been told that there will be multiple types of battle in the future, but for right now the only subtyping we are aware of is called siege, which means that after it has successfully entered the battlefield, you it triggers, you control the trigger, and then you select an opponent to gain control of and defend the battle. You and any other player in the game are then allowed to attack it as if it were a planeswalker or another player's life total, and a variety of effects in the game, things that deal damage to any target, things that deal damage to players or battles or creatures in battles, etc., will then remove. I don't exactly know what type of counter it is, but it is
Just
more or
counter.
less.
It's a counter.
Yeah, it's more or less a loyalty counter from the battle. And once the battle has had the last of its loyalty counters removed, it is then exiled, and you then cast the backside of the battle, whatever that means. Sometimes
Is
they're
a
spells,
forced cast.
sometimes they're creatures. Yeah, that's super notable, especially in CDH where rule of law is a thing. You must cast the backside when it dies. As soon as it dies, it gets exiled, and the trigger goes on the stack. You must cast the card. And it dies when the last counter is removed. So people were spitballing like if there's a battle where the backside's good enough, you could like vampire hexmage it or something to remove all the counters, and then cast the backside like much faster, right? Because theoretically, the better the battle is, the higher the number of counters it's going to enter the battlefield with.
And at this point, with the battles we've seen thus far, I don't think there's any that, at least in our side of the format, that we're worrying about like turboing the backside of. I think the backside is a nice upside, but you really want to make sure like the front side is like a worthy inclusion.
I've only seen a couple of them where I was like, oh, the backside's like playable, like it's strong enough that it could be good. But then, of course, designated the problem where it's like you have to remove the counters and it's not worth your time to remove the counters.
Yeah, it's in its effort to put into, it's almost the planeswalker problem in CDH, where like a lot of planeswalkers are really powerful if you're able to let them do their thing and work on them, and this is just something that requires work.
Yeah. Not to say that it won't. It isn't.
Yeah,
There aren't a number that are viable, but right now people are generally assumed to be correct
medium.
practice is evaluating the front side as to whether or not it's playable.
Hmm.
Um,
The
because
backside is just extra plus side
yeah,
if it
it's just
ever
bonus.
happens.
Like the backside's not super impressive from what we've seen so far. All right, so with that, we'll jump into a couple of these.
Hmm.
Invasion of Ixalan. It's another finale style effect. It is actually just finale, but as a battle. So it's green, green X. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library and or graveyard for a non-human creature with converted mana cost X or less and put it into play. Um, so viable? No.
Hold on, sorry, I was trying to pull up the card while you were speaking, and I don't know how to spell. Invasion of Ixalan.
Sorry, Ikoria. Did I say
Ikoria.
Ixalan?
Yeah, you said Ixalan. I'm just like,
Oh, my
I thought it was on
apologies.
Ikoria. Yeah, Ixalan's a different one. Ikoria. Yeah, I like this card. I think if you are a green red X specifically, creature deck that wants to find Dockside consistently and often and frequent, you play this card because it fetches exactly Dockside. It fetches
Yep,
other things. It misses missing human is kind of a rough one.
it
Um,
really is, right?
it
Like you're like,
really,
can't grab
really
your Drana,
is.
can't grab your
Can't.
Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, like those are rough misses. But I mean, it still fetches Dockside. It fetches Thoracle. It fetches Fimage. It fetches Dalthy Voidwalker at 2. I'm speaking specifically at 2. Obviously, it grabs more things, but I think the
Yeah, I
2
think
slot is
X2
the
is probably the
X
generally.
X2 is the more relevant number that we'll probably be seeing this.
Yeah, I
I
think you
don't
named
think.
most of the big hits, right?
Yeah, it doesn't replace Finale. You
Not
definitely
at
play
all.
it. You play it alongside it. If you are a deck, one of our buddies just recently started building or going back onto building Corvold. I don't know if they played Corvold
Yeah,
previously. And it's an immediate slot in. It finds Dockside. If you want to turbo out Dockside, you play this card. The backside is an 8/8 with a reach, and for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. It's fine.
super trample.
Super trample. It's a fine enough effect.
Yeah,
It's a fine
it's
enough
okay.
creature. It's all right.
6 loyalty. That's a lot to
6
remove.
loyalty. It's a lot to remove. I think this card's solid. It's a staple in low color decks that want to find Dockside, or if you're a deck that really wants to find Dockside or Thoracle. It's a finale. It's a pseudo finale effect. Those are very
Yeah,
good.
because it pulls out of the graveyard too, so recursion's
Hmm.
always strong. I just like that it's not a finisher. That's kind of like
Yeah,
disappointing.
yeah.
Is notable. I saw this line the other day. Battles are permanents, so I did see a cool line with
They
the Invasion
are.
of Ikoria where you go and you get your Dockside, you go and then cast a bounce spell to get your siege back or get your battle back, and then you
Mm.
recast it using the mana from Dockside to go get another half of your Dockside combo, like Deadeye Navigator or something. So
Oh yeah.
like if you have Chain of Vapor, you can go cast this, get a Dockside, make some treasures, Chain of Vapor the battle, sack a land, Chain of Vapor the Dockside, recast the Dockside, make some more, recast the battle, go get your Deadeye Navigator. No, go make infinite mana.
If I'm understanding this card correctly, it just says mana value X or less. So if you flicker this, do you get to search Dryad Arbor?
Yeah, you could.
Okay, it's a permanent. Permanents are very easy to abuse because we have a lot of bounce spells on our side of the format. So it has its upsides. It's not strictly better than Finale. It's strictly a second Finale.
I'm kind of looking at it like Wishclaw Talisman finale almost.
Yeah, kinda.
Okay, here's another one. This one's going to be a little bit more interesting to evaluate. It is called Invasion of Segovia. So this is a 3-mana battle. It is blue. It casts for a blue and 2. Has 4 loyalty. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 blue Kraken creature tokens with trample. And then the flip side is actually what you include it for, surprisingly enough. It is a 3/3 that says all non-creature spells you cast have Convoke. At the beginning of your end step, untap up to 4 target creatures.
Ooh. This card, I think, is going to be really good in exactly Crom decks. Because you can play this, make your 1/1s, cast Crom, and then immediately attack into this. I think because of that line specifically, and you get a pseudo like Seedborn Muse in Crom decks, I think makes this card really, really good. The non-creature spells have Convoke. Like like a Teamer Crom deck, maybe. Timnachrom letting you reduce your spells. It has
You would play
application.
this in Blue Farm?
You, yeah. I mean, the front side makes attackers for Timna. It gets beaten down immediately by a Crom and flips over into something pretty relevant.
I guess. I don't think
And
I could find the slot if I were trying to put this into a
yeah,
Blue Farm
I
deck.
think it's a. I don't know what you would take out for Blue Form just because that card already has like slots 115 through like 130 already booked.
Exactly.
Or like 101 through 130, misspoke there, whatever. I think it's interesting. I think in non-blue farm Crom decks, it's interesting. Any commander that has 4 power, and any sort of evasion, I think makes this very interesting. You're absolutely. I think this is one that you're able to pretty easily play for the backside specifically. Just because 4 loyalty isn't a hard number to beat down.
Well, then let's switch to a battle that has a hard number to beat down. This is one that I thought was kind of intriguing, but I'm not sure how good it is. So, Invasion of Arcavios. It's a 5-mana battle. Blue 3 for a 7 loyalty battle. When it enters the battlefield, search your library, graveyard, and or outside the game, so that line doesn't matter to us. You're searching your library and or your graveyard for an instant or sorcery card you own. You then reveal that card and place it into your hand. If you search your library this way, you shuffle. And the flip side says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you may copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Is this card CEDH viable?
When it enters the battlefield, search the library graveyard. This makes Kitten go burn.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, this is like your Spellseeker, but this is like Spellseeker Mark II, kind of, if you're playing a Displacer Kitten deck, right?
Kind of, yeah.
It's like it's too expensive. It's what it does, but you don't need to flip it for it to be good. It's a permanent.
You don't. And I think the thing that this card is missing to slot effortlessly into a Kitten deck is we need a way to get battles into the battlefield easily, apart from hard drawing in and hard casting them. We just don't have the generic support for battles yet, if ever.
Mono black tutors.
Are you tutoring for this over Spellseeker if you have exactly Demonic Tutor?
I don't think so, but I see a world where you're playing like some sort of like black, blue, green list with Displacer Kitten or something, and this becomes your second copy of Spellseeker. Like, you can draw into it, or maybe you end up tutoring for it because Spellseeker's already been exiled or something.
Actually, I retract. I think if you were in like exactly blue-red Kitten decks, you play this card because it fills the role of Eternal Witness incredibly well in that list, and Entomb. We'll do a Kitten episode eventually, but essentially there are like 2 crucial parts that the Kitten combo needs. 1, easy way to find cards and put them into the graveyard, and 2, a way to recur the thing that you're looping with. This does both exactly. Hell, I might try this out in Dinosaur. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting. It has my brain going. And
Dino do the big swing thing.
It does do big swing things. So we can flip into the backside, and
which is Calamax.
It's not irrelevant. It's not. Oh god, I'm going to be testing this card out. I think it's interesting. I think in Displacer Kitten Shells is most likely where we're going to see this. I think non-black Kitten Shells is where it's going to find a home if it's good enough. This card reads really well.
That's where I'm at. Like, it's the one battle that no one's talking about.
Yeah,
but
it reads really well. It's a permanent that you can abuse and return. It's Archaeomancer and it's better Spellseeker on a permanent. The issue is they are not creatures, so we can't abuse the green tutors or the green creatures cheat spells to get it out. That's my one hesitation.
Give us 2 more sets. They'll print something.
Give us like a weird birthing pod, like, I don't know,
Yo, can you imagine you like pod up from like I'll sacrifice a 3-cost battle. Like, go find a 4-cost battle.
Or like give me like a Rector style effect for something like this.
That seems like it could be really fair.
I don't know how that works like flavorly, but mechanically these are like nearly enchantment, so there's space for that. This has my gears turning. This is another card that I think if we find a shell for it is going to be very, very, very good and very effective. But it being a new type means it doesn't have the benefit of having 25 or 30 plus years of support behind the type.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's missing. It's generically incredibly powerful if you hard draw it, and that's, I think, where my issue lies.
All right, so 2 more from the new set, and then I think I'm going to throw you to a couple of old cards before we wrap back up here. So the first one is Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. This is a legendary enchantment creature, god, white 2. It's a 4/4. When Heliod enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand, and then pay 3 and 1 blue or 2 life to transform it, but only do that at sorcery speed. And when it's transformed, it becomes a blue-white legendary enchantment creature, Phyrexian God, that is a 4/6 and allows you to cast spells as though they had flash, and says spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn.
So this is a bit of a cheaty answer, but I think this card is very good. You've been testing out with this card, and now that I'm like sitting down reading it like post-mortem after seeing you pop off immensely with a game.
Well, that is cheating. Don't use my
I know,
testing.
but like I'm saying like as an observer, like it does stuff that makes me go, huh? Like makes me have to look at it, make me pay attention to it. I think 3 and 2 life is a pretty decent rate to flip this guy. And it's decent recursion built into the command zone. Someone removes like an early rest in peace exiles itself, but someone removes like an early rule of law effect, blind obedience, generic enchantment that you threw out there. You get to recur it. Someone blows up your Rhystic Study or your Mystic Remora or something like that. You get to get that back into your hand. I think that's value in and of itself. And the backside is nuts. It's did you want a Vidalcan Orrery in the command zone that also is a top combo enabler? Because it's exactly that. Like that's just how this card reads, and it's generic spells. So it's Helm of Awakening. Is that the card?
Yeah.
Like it's. I think this is one of like 2 to 3 decks that I think we're gonna see a lot of work on, a lot of discussion on. I'm very curious to see where this deck goes and see if it actually has any feats below it being like a flavor of the month type of deal. Very good commander. Very curious to see where it goes. It lends itself to the Stacks game plan very, very well. It plays through your own rule laws with absolute ease. Absolutely, yeah. No, I think we'll see a decent amount of this card. Very good.
Okay, so then last one from the new set. Like I said, I'll give you a couple of old ones just to get your take.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to skip over Fairy Mastermind and Hoarding Broodlord, because those are the easy ones. It's probably the 2 most talked about cards from the set so far. But this one I thought was a little interesting. Dusk Legion Duelist. It is a 2 mana, 1 white and 1 Vampire Soldier. It is a 2/2 with Vigilance and says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability may trigger only once each turn.
I think this is specifically a Shalai and Halar card. I don't really know where else this fits into. I think for like modern hardened scales, it's pretty cool. But I don't.
But we are not a modern podcast.
We're not a modern podcast, unfortunately. It's interesting. I think if we get like again, I only think of Shalai and Halar right now. Maybe this because this is very much recency bias talking here. But we haven't. No. Falco Spara cares about counters to some degree. Maybe there. Maybe Mono White Heliod. Maybe. I think if you have a commander that has like incidental +1/+1 counter synergy, it's probably fine. I don't think this beats out exactly Archivist of Ogma, which is where in my brain this fights for the slot of. I think it'd be hard to try and include both of them unless your commander really, really just pumps out +1/+1 counters. 1 or more. What's the cost? It's 1 in a green for Kenrith?
Yes, to put a +1/+1 counter on something.
It's not terrible. It only triggers once each turn, though. It's not terrible. I think in exactly the niche decks that this fits in, it's probably decent. It's another draw engine. It's just it's one of those cards that unfortunately doesn't pass the generic test and instead will be a niche all star.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think I was mostly thinking like Heliod, Shalai type decks when I saw it as well. But
Yeah,
I think it's really neat. It's a sweet
yeah,
effect.
it's super interesting. I think if your commander does stuff with it, this card's pretty good.
Okay, so then I'm gonna go do a little time warp style
Whoop, 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 whoop.
flashback here. I'm gonna keep this one limited to commanders just because it'll be easier than trying to dig up a million like random cards that people might not be super familiar with. Have to go look up a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna keep it to legendary creatures or things that can be your commander. The first of which is everyone's favorite gooey dinosaur, the Mimeoplasm. Uh, for black, blue, green, and 2, it's an ooze. It's a 0/0. As it enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of 1 with an additional number of +1/+1 counters equal to the power of the other. So it's basically a body double with some extra text, and it gives you Sultai color identity. Is this card still viable?
OG Sultai combo piled necrotic ooze. I think this card begs to have someone obsess over it. I think that it's a win con in the command zone that is able to make use of Buried Alive, or just like generic mill shenanigans, Hermit Druid, I guess. I like this card. I've always had a soft spot for the Mimeoplasm. I haven't personally built it, but I've seen it in action. I've looked at a lot of lists. I do like this guy. I like him a lot. But I think it's one of those that it needs a solid pilot behind it who has put a lot of hours and a lot of theory into it, and it will absolutely do work. It's definitely not on the forefront of CEDH. However, if those stars align, it can I absolutely see this being on the forefront again.
Okay, that's fair assessment. Not too committal, but gives room for growth.
Yeah, like it's one of those cards that the ceiling on this card is literally win the game in the command zone. Historically, those are good things, and if they're I don't know what the piles are like these days for this card, but it's a win con in the command zone. Those have playability in CDH. I just don't know what that list and what that win would look like is my issue.
Fair enough. So here's another one. Have you ever wanted to play Yuriko, but if Yuriko was cool? Well, let me introduce you to Satoru Umezawa.
Oh, yep, I already know this guy.
Yeah, okay. Well, for our listeners then, Black Blue 1, it's a 2/4 human ninja. Whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Choose one of them to place in your hand, the rest onto the bottom of your library in any order, and this ability may trigger only once each turn. Has additional text saying that each creature card in your hand has a ninjutsu cost of Black Blue 2. Is this card CDH viable?
Unfortunately, no. I really like this guy.
Why not?
Exactly, Yuriko exists, and that's the exact spot that this card fights for. They do different things, however, they require the same initial setup. Satoru just requires like 3 times the amount of mana that Yuriko needs, and it's harder to pull a payoff on. I really like this guy. This was like one of the last like 2 or 3 casual decks I brewed before really committing to CDH. I really like this guy. He does a lot of cool things. I was doing weird combo shenanigans with like looping Peregrine Drake and like Cloud of Fairies and with a Vela out to make infinite mana, and then just like just draining the table with Vela triggers. And it has the upside of it's able to play. So we're looking at 2 kind of things with it. It requires essentially the same enablers as like Winota, or the colorless enablers that Winota has, the same enablers that Yuriko has. And it really wants you to have big creatures in your hand versus on top of your deck. The issue is the top of the deck is easier to, 1, manipulate, get cards onto, and you can also do it blind with no extra setup. Whereas Satoru needs all of those things, and it requires a mana investment for the ability. It's so close. This is a card that I would love to be proven wrong on. I think of any of these cards, I want someone to prove me wrong with this card the most. It it unfortunately just requires too much setup, I think. And it's hard to just generically use because to use it specifically, you want to be cheating creatures that are 4 CMC and higher, and have them be effective.
And just not that many creatures in black blue that do that.
Yeah, there's a decent amount of cards. Like you can like sneak in Consecrated Sphinx. You can knock someone out with a Blightsteel Colossus. I was doing some funny things with like Burning Rune Demon and like reanimation shenanigans and stuff like that. Like there are enough targets. Um, it requires a lot to get set up. Even at like a casual level, I'm just like this deck is clunky. It is clunky. I think if we had like a consistent way to like reduce ninjutsu cost, which of
There's
note, I
only
think
one.
there's only one that does it. You can't reduce the cost with training grounds.
Nope.
I think we get a couple more like ninjutsu like enablers and cost decreasers for it. Maybe.
I think you said it best when you said clunky, and I think that's really in the end what ends up like boiling out non CDH decks or like more casual or high power lists from what CDH decks tend to be, is that CDH decks can be very tuned, very refined, specific game plans, trimming all the fat. And I just don't think Satoru allows you to effectively do that.
If the cost was variable or cheaper, if it wasn't just a static 2 blue black, or even if it was like the creature's CMC minus 2 generic or something like that, then we can talk.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's possible because it's almost like it's similar brain space to me that like Chainer fits in, where it's like Chainer's activation is free and he does stuff on his own and enables other cards to do things better. This card needs the commander out, needs cards in hand, needs mana, needs enablers, needs mana to be able to redeploy those enablers. Unfortunately, Yuriko just does this game plan just significantly better and easier.
Yep. Yeah,
and that's the harsh reality with Satoru. I want this guy to be so good. I love him. He's great. You can cheat in fucking Consecrated Sphinx. Uncounterable. It's great. I love it. It's not there.
No. Okay. Well, then last one from our review of old cards, are they CDH viable? The former terror of the tables, back before Ad Nauseam even really got like super cemented into the format.
I'm very excited for what you're about to say.
Back before like a lot of different graveyard strategies were super well explored. Sharuum the Hegemon. Is this card still CDH viable?
Oh, give the people a refresher on Sharuum.
This card, everyone listening should know what this card is. But in case you don't, for the low cost of white, blue, black, and 3 generic mana, you get a legendary artifact creature Sphinx with flying. It is a 5/5, and it says, when Sharuum the Hegemon enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card was like back when CDH first started to get like its legs underneath it, first started to take off. This card was infamous because were so many things that went infinite with this card. It's in 3 of the best colors in the game, so you would get counter magic, you would get like stacks pieces for your opponents from white. You'd be able to play effective removal because of white, board wipes. Back when like that was the thing to do. You'd get black for Vampiric and Demonic Tutor. You would be able to even play Diabolic Tutor and Diabolic Intent and things like that. It was able to cheat on mana costs for insanely strong artifacts like Blightsteel Colossus, using its Enter the Battlefield ability, or you could even abuse things like the Legend rule and the way that interacts with it as a legendary creature to achieve a bunch of like infinite Enter the Battlefield, leave the battlefield type effects to kill opponents with a Blood Artist or a Disciple of the Vault or something along those lines. And it was just widely seen as the scourge of my deck is a 7 type decks, because there are a number of cards that allow you to get those loops off and get those loops off very efficiently. At least what used to be considered efficient. Now, not so sure. What do you think, Joe?
I love Shroom because it's the exact same card as like Damia to me. Like Damia Sage Stone, just
that card was also a house.
OG big power commanders. You knew exactly what happened when someone busted out Shroom against you. Unfortunately, we have better Shroom, and his name is Tivit. And that's unfortunately the truth. Because I think ideally you want to set up. I think the combo is usually with like Sculpting Steel. I think we have a couple more cards that do the Sculpting Steel thing. It's interesting because I think the deck has enough density of those cards. And I think that they're playable enough without the context of Shroom to be able to cause the loop to go infinite. You just need to find your payout piece. I think it's potent. I think Tivit is just a stronger, strictly better strategy. I think Tivit allows you to just have like Time Sieve be your one card win condition. It can win. Tivit can win through combat loops. It can win through thoracle. It can draw its deck. It makes mana. It draws cards in the command zone. And it's the exact same casting cost as Shroom. I think if Shroom was cheaper, like two an Esper, we have an argument there. I think for the exact same cost as Tivit, unfortunately, I think Shroom's time isn't now.
But what do you mean? It is an artifact creature, so it can be my transmute artifact becomes a 1-card win condition with Bolas's Citadel.
Oh, true. But you can do the same thing with Tivit.
I mean, he's not an artifact creature, but yeah, I agree with you.
Is he not an artifact
creature?
No,
he's not.
He was.
But no, I would agree with you. I don't think the card holds up anywhere near as well as it used to, just because right now, I think for a commander to do something, like to be considered viable, it has to have one of two impacts on the game. It either needs to serve as a win condition for you, or it needs to be able to immediately impact the game consistently the turn it comes down. Mm-hmm. And I think that Tivit definitely does the latter. It also serves as part of a 2-card combo, so thus serving the former, but it definitely does the latter way better than Shroom does for the exact same cost, like you were saying. On top of which, it is more difficult to remove. It has a higher power and toughness. It generates treasures immediately. It generates card draw immediately. So it's not relying on being a combo piece because it can also be an engine. And I think that is really like, because if you look at the other Esper commanders that exist right now that see play as and are considered viable in Esper, at least widely so, like Tymna and Malcolm, both of them are going to impact the table immediately as after they come down. Malcolm is going to start generating treasures immediately after the turn, after you untap with it, because it'll start swinging and generating treasures. Might even be that same turn because you have a changeling in play or something to start creating treasures. And Tymna, of course, you play once you have creatures to attack with. You are instantly drawing at least one extra card. And I don't think that Shroom, especially like you said, at 6 mana, is just, I don't think it quite holds up to where it was.
Yeah, I think as like a start for like the Esper 1-card combo pile, it's a historic mark. I will have mad respect for Shroom. Unfortunately, time is not favorable to this card. I think we have just better options in these colors. Unfortunately, once again, I'm welcome to be proven wrong. There might be some like obvious tech that I'm not missing, or some crazy thing that this commander can do that is not immediately jumping to mind, and I welcome that opportunity.
Yeah, please, if you have a sweet list and you happen to hear this podcast, we'd love
absolutely.
We'd love to hear it. We'll even if you have a list that you share with us and we see it, and we're like, whoa, this is really viable. Like we think this deck is sick. We would love to talk about it on the podcast.
I'm always down for saucy stuff.
Yeah.
Give me the saucy stuff. Unfortunately, in a vacuum, currently, I don't think it's good enough.
So if you have the list though, and you're like, oh, this is it, ping us on Twitter, share it in the comments on YouTube, or
wherever. We have a Moxfield. Send us Moxfield.
Hit us up on Moxfield. Yeah. share the list with us directly there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I unfortunately, my opinion as of right now, which like you said, Joe, prove me wrong, but I don't think it's quite there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you got any more for me?
I have no more right now. I
Excellent.
mean, the list is endless. We
That is
could
true.
go on continuously. We have hundreds of legends and thousands of cards that we could assess. But I think in the interest of your sanity, mine, and of course all the people who are asking when this particular episode is going to be over, we are good for now. We'll let you all go.
Right now. All right. Well, on that note, I don't know what we set out to do this episode, but we came here, we did it, we talked about some magic. I want to thank you, Atlas, for being on here again as we go through this wild ride that is the CDH mid-range adventure extravaganza, whatever. I want to thank our listeners for sticking around. It's great that y'all listen to us. I appreciate you. I appreciate you all. And I hope you have a good one.